Real grandchildren only. Stepkids don't count, my Aunt Francine declared in the front row of the funeral home, her voice cutting through the quiet murmurs of mourning. Mother's estate should stay in the family bloodline. That means her biological grandchildren, not some random child who married in. My 10-year-old stepson Caleb, who had called Grandma Eleanor Gigi and visited her every Sunday for 3 years, heard every word and ran from the room with tears streaming down his face. What Aunt Francine didn't know, what no one in that room knew, was that Grandma Eleanor had changed her will the same day she'd met Caleb, and the lawyer standing quietly in the back was about to read something that would shatter every expectation. The funeral had been elegant but cold. Eleanor Whitmore had been 91 years old, sharp-minded until her final days, and beloved by the community for her decades of volunteer work and charitable giving. But within the family, she'd been something of an enigma, affectionate with some, distant with others, and fiercely protective of her opinions. I'd married into the Whitmore family 3 years ago, bringing my son Caleb from my first marriage. His biological father had abandoned us when Caleb was 3, and my second husband, Michael, had adopted him officially 2 years after our wedding. To Michael, Caleb was his son in every way that mattered. To Grandma Eleanor, Caleb had been something unexpected, a late-life gift that had transformed her final years. But to the rest of the family, Caleb was an outsider. A stepkid. A child who didn't carry Whitmore blood and therefore didn't count. Aunt Francine was the worst offender. Michael's mother's younger sister, she'd spent 50 years positioning herself as the family matriarch in waiting. She'd managed Eleanor's social calendar, organized family events, and made sure everyone knew exactly where they stood in the Whitmore hierarchy. I stood somewhere near the bottom, right next to the stepkid. Someone should go after Caleb, Michael said, standing. Let him cry it out, Francine replied dismissively. He needs to understand his place. Mother's estate is worth considerable money. We can't have outsiders expecting a share. He's not an outsider. He's my son. He's your wife's son. There's a difference. There's no difference at all. Blood says otherwise. I put my hand on Michael's arm. I'll go. You stay for the service. I found Caleb in the funeral home's garden, curled up on a bench near a small fountain. His shoulders were shaking with sobs. Hey, buddy. I sat down beside him. I'm so sorry you heard that. Why does Aunt Francine hate me? She doesn't hate you. She just doesn't understand some things. She said I'm not a real grandchild. But Gigi always said I was special. He looked up at me with red-rimmed eyes. Did Gigi not really love me? Gigi loved you more than almost anyone else in this family. You know that. Then why is Aunt Francine saying those things? Because Aunt Francine cares about money and blood and things that don't really matter. Gigi cared about hearts. And your heart was exactly what she needed. The truth was, Eleanor and I had gotten off to a rocky start. When Michael had first introduced me, she'd been skeptical. Another divorce, another child, more complications. But then I'd brought Caleb to meet her. Something had shifted that day. Something profound. Caleb had been 7 years old, shy and nervous about meeting his new family. Eleanor had been recovering from hip surgery, irritable and impatient with visitors. But Caleb had noticed the chess set on her coffee table and asked if she played. Eleanor had been a chess champion in her youth, a fact nobody in the family remembered or cared about. She'd taught Caleb the basics that afternoon, and by the end of the visit, they were deep in a game that Caleb was delightfully, hopelessly losing. He's a terrible player, Eleanor had told me later, smiling for the first time in months. But he has a beautiful mind. He sees patterns others miss. He just needs practice. From that day forward, Caleb visited Eleanor every Sunday. They played chess. They talked about books. They watched old movies together. Eleanor had transformed from a distant grandmother figure into Caleb's most devoted fan, attending his school plays, celebrating his birthdays, calling him every Wednesday to hear about his week. She saw something in me, Caleb had told me once. Something special. She said I reminded her of someone. I'd later learned that Eleanor had lost a son in childhood, Michael's older brother, David, who had died of leukemia at age 11. The family never spoke about it. Eleanor had rarely mentioned it herself. But something about Caleb, his gentleness, his curiosity, his way of looking at the world, had touched a wound that had never fully healed. Gigi loved you, I told Caleb now, pulling him close. Whatever happens with the family or the estate, that love was real. Nobody can take it away. I miss her. I know, sweetheart. I miss her too. We returned to the service for the reading of the will. The Whitmore family had gathered in a private reception room. Michael and me, Aunt Francine and her husband Charles, their 3 adult children, Michael's 2 sisters and their families. Nearly 20 people, all waiting to hear what they would inherit. Caleb sat beside me, his hand in mine. He'd refused to wait outside, despite the hostile looks from Francine's corner of the room. The lawyer, a silver-haired man named Douglas Pemberton who had served Eleanor for decades, took his position at the front of the room. He looked tired but composed. Before I read the official document, I should explain that Eleanor made several changes to her will over the past 3 years. The most recent revision was completed 18 months ago, after careful deliberation. She was of sound mind, and I can attest to her absolute clarity about her wishes. Just read it, Francine snapped. We all know Mother wanted the estate distributed among her biological grandchildren. The house alone is worth $2 million. Perhaps we should let Mr. Pemberton continue, Michael said quietly. Douglas cleared his throat and opened the document. This is the last will and testament of Eleanor Margaret Whitmore. I'll summarize the key provisions. He began with the smaller bequests, jewelry to various grandchildren, charitable donations to Eleanor's favorite organizations, specific items left to longtime friends. The family grew restless, waiting for the main event. Now, Douglas said, regarding the primary estate, including the family home, all investment accounts, and remaining assets valued at approximately $4.7 million. The room went still. The entirety of the primary estate is bequeathed to one individual. Francine leaned forward, a predatory smile already forming. The sole beneficiary is Caleb James Whitmore, step-grandson of Eleanor Whitmore, with his mother Margaret Whitmore serving as trustee until his 18th birthday. Silence. Absolute, stunned silence. Then chaos. That's impossible. Francine shot to her feet. He's not even related to her. This has to be a mistake or a forgery. I assure you, this document is authentic and legally binding. Douglas remained calm. Eleanor was explicit in her wishes. Mother would never leave everything to a stepchild. She believed in family. In blood. Perhaps you'd like to hear Eleanor's own words. Douglas pulled out a separate envelope. She included a personal statement to be read at this moment. The room fell quiet again, though the tension was suffocating. Douglas began to read Eleanor's letter. To my family, by now you've heard my decision, and I'm sure some of you are upset. I expect Francine is already questioning my sanity. Let me be clear, I was never more lucid than when I made this choice. For years, I watched this family reduce love to biology. I watched you calculate relationships by blood percentages. I watched you exclude, diminish, and overlook anyone who didn't fit your narrow definition of real family. Then I met Caleb. He was 7 years old, shy and scared, walking into a room full of strangers who'd already decided he didn't belong. But he saw my chess set, the one David and I used to play on, the one nobody has touched in 50 years. And he asked if I knew how to play. In that moment, I saw my David. Not in his face or his blood, but in his soul. The same curiosity. The same gentleness. The same gift for seeing beauty where others see only ordinary things. Caleb visited me every Sunday for 3 years. He never asked for anything. He just showed up, played chess, and listened to an old woman's stories. He gave me something my biological grandchildren never did. His time. His attention. His love. Do you know how many of you visited me regularly before I started declining? None. You came at holidays when gifts were expected. You came when you needed money or advice or a signature on a document. But Caleb came because he wanted to. Because he loved me. Because he's the only one who ever saw me as more than a source of inheritance. The house meant nothing to me. The money meant nothing. What mattered was being known. Being seen. Being valued for myself, not for what I could provide. Caleb gave me that. So I'm giving him everything. Not to punish the rest of you, but to reward the only one who deserved it. And if that makes you angry, perhaps you should ask yourselves why a 10-year-old boy with no blood connection to me understood family better than you ever did. Love is not a matter of DNA. It's a matter of showing up. Caleb showed up. The rest of you didn't. Eleanor. Douglas folded the letter. The room was silent. Caleb was crying quietly, different tears this time. Grief mixed with overwhelming emotion. This will be contested, Francine said, her voice shaking with fury. Undue influence. Manipulation. That woman, she pointed at me, manipulated Mother into changing her will. I had nothing to do with it, I said quietly. I didn't even know until just now. You expect me to believe that? I don't care what you believe. Eleanor made her own choices. She always did. Mr. Pemberton, Francine demanded, surely there are grounds to challenge this? You're welcome to try. But I should inform you that Eleanor anticipated this response. She underwent a comprehensive mental competency evaluation, specifically to preempt any claims of diminished capacity. She also documented her relationship with Caleb extensively. Photographs, letters, records of their visits. Her reasoning is clearly articulated and legally sound. She was 91 years old. She was sharp as a tack until her final breath. I've been her lawyer for 30 years, and I've never seen her more certain of anything. Francine sat down heavily, her face a mask of disbelief and rage. Michael put his arm around Caleb. Hey, buddy. You okay? Caleb nodded, wiping his eyes. Gigi really loved me. She really did. What do I do with a house and all that money? I'm 10. You don't have to do anything right now. Your mom will help manage it until you're older. And then you'll decide what you want, college, a home, whatever matters to you. Can we keep playing chess at Gigi's house? I don't want to sell it. I felt my throat tighten. We can talk about that. Nothing has to change right away. I want to keep it. For when I'm older. So I can remember her. Then we'll keep it. The weeks after the funeral were turbulent. Francine hired lawyers and made threats. She called me every name in the book and accused me of orchestrating a con from the beginning. She tried to turn Michael's sisters against us, with limited success. They'd never been close to Eleanor either, and their guilt was louder than their greed. The legal challenges went nowhere. Eleanor had anticipated every objection and built an ironclad case. Her competency evaluation was unassailable. Her documentation was exhaustive. And her letter, that beautiful, devastating letter, made clear that this was not the decision of a confused old woman, but the deliberate choice of someone who understood exactly what she was doing. 6 months after the funeral, Caleb and I drove out to Eleanor's house. Our house now, held in trust until he came of age. The Grand Victorian sat on 2 acres of manicured grounds. Eleanor had lived there for 60 years, raising children and grandchildren who'd eventually scattered to their own lives and forgotten about her. Only Caleb had come back. We walked through the rooms together. He showed me where he and Gigi had played chess, where they'd watched movies, where she'd taught him to bake cookies that came out burned but tasted like love. I'm going to take care of it, he said seriously. Keep it nice. Like she did. I know you will. And when I'm old enough, I want to start something. A scholarship or a program. For kids like me. Kids like you. Stepkids. Foster kids. Kids who don't have a family that sees them. He looked at me with eyes that seemed older than 10. Gigi saw me when nobody else did. I want to do that for other people. I pulled him into a hug, overwhelmed by the depth of his heart. She chose the right person, I whispered. She knew exactly what she was doing. She always said I had a beautiful mind, that I see patterns others miss. You do. You always have. We stood in Eleanor's living room, surrounded by her things, her memories, her legacy. Outside, the sun was setting over the garden she'd tended for decades. Aunt Francine had called Caleb, not a real grandchild. But Eleanor had known the truth. Family isn't about blood. It's about showing up. It's about love that doesn't ask for anything in return. Caleb had shown up, and Eleanor had given him everything. Not because he was blood, because he was hers. And that was the only thing that ever really mattered.